Formula One has gained a ton of hype over the past few years, from the drama to the hot drivers to the incredible landscapes, but it is also a pinnacle of technical expertise and advancements. If you've recently watched Drive to Survive and you're just curious to learn more about the sport, or if all of your guy friends won't shut up about engines, I am here to make you an expert on all of the things that this sport has to offer. Hi, my name is Zoe. I have been watching Formula One basically since I was in the womb, and although I was a little girly girl whenever I was little and I thought I was too cool for the sport, the bug did eventually bite, and I actually went to college for mechanical engineering, where I was part of a student-run formula team where we designed and built a car. So while I may not be an expert in all of the things, I do know a little bit about what I am talking about, and I hope that by the end of this series, you will come to appreciate the art, elegance, and grit that is the world of Formula One. Now, I would assume that since you've clicked on this video that you probably know a thing or two about Formula One, but I'm gonna lay it all out here with the basics. 20 drivers, 10 teams, 1 champion. That's it. That's really all you need to know. Just kidding. Okay, we have 20 drivers, 2 for each team. Typically, the drivers will sign a contract for at least a year. Sometimes they may be longer, and sometimes if they're not driving too hot, they may get the boot. These teams tend to stay pretty much consistent year over year. I do believe in 2026 there is actually a new team coming out, but right now there are only 10 teams. We have Alpine, Aston Martin, Ferrari, Haas, Kick Sauber, McLaren, Mercedes, Visa Cash App Racing Bulls, yes, that is the full name, don't get me started, Red Bull Racing, and Williams. These teams are businesses, and they may change names or slightly different teams depending on who they are sponsored by. So all of the drivers compete in the championship to earn the most points. You get points if you finish in the top 10. Obviously, if you win a race, you're gonna get a lot more points than if you come in 10th in that race. You can also get some miscellaneous points from other things, like having the fastest lap during a race or getting pole position, which means you qualify first. Basically, the simple goal, win as much as you can, obviously. In addition to the Drivers' Championship, there is also a Constructors' Championship, so that is for the teams. The team of the driver who wins the Driver Championship is not necessarily guaranteed to be the winner of the Constructors' Championship, which is what actually happened last year, where Max Verstappen won the Drivers' Championship, but his team is Red Bull, and McLaren actually won the Constructors' Championship. This really encourages the teams to have 2 really strong drivers. They can't have one really good driver and somebody else to kind of play his sidekick. Each year there are between 20 and 25 races. I believe that there are 24 races in 2025. These races take place around the globe from March until November. A race weekend typically starts with a couple of practice sessions, and then there is qualifying on the Saturday before the race on the Sunday. Sometimes they also have sprint races, which is basically just a shortened version of the full race before the actual race, and this just adds a little bit more spice to the season. I believe that there are 6 sprint races this season. Some of the biggest drivers that you would need to know for this season of Formula One. First and foremost, I love good old Lewis Hamilton. He's a 7-time world champion, and he's just left his longtime team at Mercedes, where he won all of those championships, to go to Ferrari. Huge upset. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone's really excited, I hope, to see Lewis in red. His teammate is Charles Leclerc, who is gorgeous, basically. He's also a good driver. Next we have Max Verstappen. He was last year's world champion, marking his 4th world championship victory. He drives with Red Bull Racing, and his teammate from last year, Sergio Perez, just couldn't keep up the pace, so he has a new teammate this year with Liam Lawson, which is very interesting from a drama perspective, because up until Sergio Perez, Verstappen has a history of not necessarily getting on all that well with his teammate, and Red Bull has switched people in and out of his teammate seat quite a lot. So we'll see how this new young talent manages. I also cannot go through this video without talking about Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris. They are the 2 drivers at McLaren. As I mentioned, McLaren won the Constructors' Championship last year. At the end of last season, they were really catching up to the Red Bulls, so maybe this year one of them could be the new world champion. They are both incredible drivers, and while I do think that there is a little bit of favoritism towards Lando Norris, I don't think we can count out Oscar Piastri either, because he is wicked fast and sometimes a little bit more risky than Lando in a way that can pay off. There is so much more that I could get into, but that is a summary on the top teams and some of the key drivers. In my opinion, the coolest thing about Formula One is the technology that drives it and the engineering that has taken place over the past 75 years of its existence. It is as much about the car as it is about the driver, but more than that, it's about what the driver and the car can become when they are designed correctly. I'm gonna just kind of touch on a couple of topics when it comes to the technical elements of a car, and over the course of this series, I'm going to be going into more depth into all of these areas. Let's start with aerodynamics. So aero is basically the shape of the car. When we're young and we're taking physics classes, we will often neglect airflow and air resistance in those problems because it can be really complicated, and in our simple little problems that we do at school, it often isn't actually going to make that big of an impact. However, once you start going 200 miles an hour around a racing track, that airflow can create some serious drag and resistance on this car, and you can use that to your advantage by shaping the way that the air flows over the vehicle in order to accentuate other parts of the car that will improve your overall performance. Next you have the power unit of the car. This consists of obviously your typical internal combustion engine, your turbocharger, battery, and systems to recover energy from the car. This is just basically that thing that turns the car into a pretty little model into a rocket. Next we have suspension and chassis. This is my personal favorite aspect of the technical elements of the car because even little changes can affect the way that the car is handled and the stability of the car as it's going through a racetrack. Things that affect this are everything from the geometry of the rods holding the tires to the car to the stiffness of the material that the actual body of the car is made out of. It really is what enables the driver and the car to mesh in their own unique way. Next we have tires. Now you wouldn't think that a little bit of rubber and air would have such a massive impact on the ability of a car to complete a race, but it really does. F1, everybody uses the same type of tire, but you have different compounds that you can choose, and depending on what you choose throughout the race kind of impacts the strategy that you're taking, and so tires really come into play more from a strategic perspective during a race. Really, there is like so much more that I could dive into, but I feel like that kind of covers the basics for today. Another really interesting thing to know about Formula One is while yes, everybody knows about the drivers themselves, Formula One is very, very much a team sport. Between the design, manufacturing, and maintenance of these vehicles, it really takes like a whole army to put these things together. There are the people who are actually present at the race, there are the people in the pit crew, the strategists, and the people who are talking to the drivers during the race to help them make the best decisions. Drivers do usually have to stop 1 to 3 times during a race, and the timing of when you do that is everything. It can really make or break a race for a driver. Next, something really important to me as a woman who is interested in Formula One is the presence of women in this sport. F1 has long been seen as a male-dominated sport, which makes sense. I mean, men have been at the forefront as drivers, engineers, designers, etc. I don't think this is a big surprise as things like tinkering with engines, adrenaline and the speed, the bachelor culture, it is all very male-oriented historically. But there is a growing number of women in so many roles, from strategists to engineers, and they also even have a whole F1 academy focused on women drivers. To name just a few people who have had some impact as women in this sport, we have Claire Williams, who was actually the first female team principal. She no longer is, but she held that title. Simona de Silvestro, who is a trailblazer. She is a driver in Formula E and also in IndyCar. Then if we go way, way, way back, we actually have Maria Teresa de Filippis. the first woman to race in Formula One way back in 1958. She broke down the barriers at the time when it was genuinely unheard of. And then finally, we have Susie Wolff, who is a former test driver for the Mercedes Formula One team, and she is actually now the managing director of the F1 Academy. So to explain the F1 Academy a little bit more, before anybody comes into Formula One, they typically move through the ranks of Formula 4, Formula 3, Formula 2 before they eventually get to good old Formula One. And F1 Academy is kind of like one of those tiers, but it is exclusively for females. So my hope is that this will give some female drivers a little bit more exposure and the chance to maybe one day make it into Formula One as well. I'm really passionate about making this series because I just feel like you don't see enough women talking about this sport from a technical perspective. And this is just a way to break down some of those barriers and show that women have just as much talent, passion, and ability to contribute to this. This is a sport that I think is really incredible, and I love that there has been so much more hype around it in the past few years. And I hope that this series means that you will come away learning a thing or two about the innovation and the technical expertise and some of the women who have really made a name for themselves in this sport. If there is any particular topics that you would like me to talk about with this series going forward, please let me know down below so that I know what you guys would be interested in hearing more about. I am open to talking about anything from the innovation and the technical things and the math behind all of that kind of stuff to just how hot the drivers are and how incredible it is and all of the drama that goes into it. We are going to touch on it all throughout this series. So with that, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!